At the tone, please state your name followed by the pound sign.
Okay, so let's get started. You guys see my screen okay?
Okay, just a quick comment, right? So our goal today is that he is going to present Symphony.next update, and in the second half of the meeting, we'll try to find out if there are any open questions and define what questions the team should answer and identify the people who will be involved in getting to that answer. And that's our goal for today. All right, thanks, Steve. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Arun. I'll start with kind of a brief intro as why Symphony Next. What is the issues we face with the current version of Symphony, and how Symphony Next is going to solve those. And then I'll present a couple of demos. Based on the time we have, if there are no questions towards the end, I can present more demos. All right. So let's get started. So Symphony, today we're going to discuss where Symphony is now and where we're taking it with Symphony Next. I got a couple of demos. I'll also show you guys for the current users of Symphony, how you can migrate to Symphony Next, and we'll open the floor for questions. So when we first began Symphony Next way back in around November, December timeframe last year, these were the kind of the goals. The first was, the biggest goal was really to address the quote-unquote steep learning curve of OSGI. So as many of you know, today Symphony is based off OSGI, and we have heard feedback from the Symphony developers that hey, I'm a JavaScript developer. It's unnatural for me to open Eclipse and create a plugin, a Java plugin project, just to get some JavaScript going. Okay, so while the framework itself is very solid, there are lots of great things about it. It's the getting on board, the initial learning curve is what we want to target. Okay. Now, we also want to address some of the newer, support some of the newer web frameworks like AngularJS and Bootstrap. Of course, the UX team has been working hard on archipelago patterns. Symphony is going to be the framework to implement those patterns. While doing all that, we want to continue to be backward compatible, and hopefully we will make Symphony Next a lot easier so teams like you guys can contribute back to the code base. All right, so a quick essence diagram of what Symphony Next is. I know this is the Architecture Council. This is by no means the architecture diagram. It's just a simple way to represent what Symphony now is. So you have a core, which is a collection of plugins. So these are Java and JavaScript plugins together. The functionality it provides is your layout of your application. It has the widgets. It has a lot of the web shell, interaction with the browser and your server. Extensions, these are the claim to fame of Symphony, where any consumer, any application can extend Symphony's offerings, and you could also provide your own offerings that further down can also be extended. Okay, and features on top are things like your inbox, your discovery, search, authentication, storage, a whole bunch of UI and non-UI features that Symphony provides that most of you are already using. Okay, now everything is now bundled in OSGI, right? So that is the kind of the bitter pill that you have to swallow before you can get on board Symphony. Okay, so where we're taking Symphony next, we are pushing the OSGI up and to the right. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit more details on this. So what this means is that you'll have your core extensions and features available, as before, And we're going to also have the non-UI extensions and features as in OSGI. Okay, so what do the green boxes mean, right? The green boxes is pure JavaScript. So if you're a front-end developer, you should be able to only use core extensions and features and get a whole lot of Symphony that you get today. Okay, the only time you need to go to OSGI is if you need some of the quote-unquote back-end features, which is like the authentication. If you want to tie something to your MRS and IMF, or if you want, some of the existing inbox or Discovery IQ back-end pieces of it, right? Now, anything else, if you don't use MRS, if you don't care about, the OSGI, you should be able to use Symphony just with the green boxes, okay? So that's the change we're making. So we're completely decoupling the front-end UI pieces of Symphony from OSGI, right? So once again, the green boxes is all JavaScript. You do not need to use Eclipse anymore. Okay, anytime I say that, I get a huge applause. So I'm guessing everybody's applauding in your own rooms now. So there's no Java backend dependencies. Your backend can be PHP, Node. It doesn't matter, right? Of course, you could still use Java if that's what you prefer. Now these green boxes, it provides archipelago patterns. You get the shell, which is your browser frame, and you get all the nice widgets that we already have. We also upgraded a lot of widgets, and we're using Bootstrap for the layout. So when you use Symphony Next, by default you have Bootstrap as your CSS, and then all the layout is responsive. As in, when you go from your desktop browser to an iPad to your smartphone, the layout should resize accordingly. Okay. Now, just to make the point clear again, today, if you're a front-end developer, you have to open Eclipse, and you need to include all these projects. Now, these are not files; these are individual projects, and each project has a bunch of JavaScript, a bunch of Java files, and whole other plugin XMLs. It's a bit of like this guy. So when you open it, you're not sure how to proceed. There's just a whole lot of things you have to understand before you could even write a single line of code. All right. So front-end developer with Symphony Next today, when you get Symphony Next, this is what you need to do. 4 lines of JavaScript includes. That's it. Okay. With these 4 lines, these are just files. You should be able to build your UI application, which is archipelago friendly. Okay, you'll feel like this guy once you move to Symphony Next. All right, so Symphony, some logos that we use. Can someone guess what this logo is? Up on the right. Okay, so this is Indonesia, but I couldn't find a logo for archipelago, so turns out it's Indonesia. We're using Gulp. For some of you who are familiar with building JavaScript, Gulp is a Node.js-based task runner, so we're using that to build. I'll give you a quick demo of that. We're using QUnit today to test, but we're also looking at Karma and Jasmine as to enhance the testing. So our goal for the testing is that with Symphony Next, when you are building an application, we also provide you a testing harness, right? So what that means is that since Symphony knows, what workspaces you're going to create, what widgets you're using, a lot of the knowledge will be transferred as a testing provider, and all you have to do is to, provide some mock data that fits your application, and you should be able to, unit test your application rather quickly. Okay? And like I mentioned, we're also using Bootstrap. Okay. All right. So what can you build with Symphony Next? You can build this awesome app 1, which only uses the JavaScript piece of Symphony, the green boxes. Okay. Now it's packaged into this blue box, which you can be any server. This is a web app. So the deployment can be, any. It doesn't have to be a Java-based technology. It can be anything, right? So that's what I mean here by no Java backend requirement. That's Awesome App 1. You could also build Awesome App 2, which is your today's OSGI-based Symphony application, okay? So what this means is that this is an emphasis saying that we are going to continue to support OSGI-based Symphony applications, okay? So we'll talk a little bit about, what it means when you want to migrate, okay? But the point is, there's no requirement for you to go out of OSGI if you're already comfortable with it, okay? All right, so just a quick example of what Awesome App 1 might look like.
Hey, Sri, one question.
Sure.
So when you show those two as two different apps, is it possible that some app might be using pieces from both sides?
Yes. In the sense, we'll answer more of this, Arun, while we're talking about migration, but the answer, kind of a high-level answer is yes, you'll be using both pieces. But more detailed answer is, our recommendation is, if you want your UI piece only, we recommend to go outside of OSGI. But if you, if you're comfortable with it, you will still use it. But the good news is that whatever you see, the green box here, the core plugin, contains all of this. Okay. So you're not going to be left out. If you're in OSGI world, you're not going to be left out of any of the new widgets or the features that they're going to build. So it'll still be available for you. Okay. And also, guys, feel free to ask questions at any point. We'll also have time towards the end, but we can make it more interactive. All right. So Awesome App 1. What an example here is. So this is your cloud architecture, just a very simple, representation. So we have all these microservices, mapping, workflow, repository, and so on. And we have a cloud landing application, okay? So this is where, when the user logs in, a browser, this is the app he's going to talk to, okay? What this app does is it's going to ship all the JavaScript for all the cloud applications. So what this means is, since the cloud landing app is based on Symphony Next, it's going to get all the green boxes, okay? Now from here, you're also going to see your cloud JavaScript application, JavaScript, and those JavaScript are the ones that will now talk to your microservices, okay? So as you can see, there's no OSGI here, okay? So this is your Awesome App 1, where you're using just the JavaScript piece of Symphony Next, and you're able to build your application and talk to microservices via REST. Okay.
Hey, Sri, I have a quick question. Are you guys planning to do the authentication and IMF with this kind of microservices as well, or are you guys planning to leave that in OSGI?
So for the cloud, they have cloud as their own authentication. So they will not be using Symphony's authentication, but we will see, in a few minutes how you could potentially also use Symphony's authentication with OSGI if you need to. Okay, but if you are interested in only the JavaScript piece of Symphony Next, just to get your archipelago and all the widgets going, and you can take care of your own a server and your authentication, that's also fine.
Okay, cool.
Okay. All right. So without further ado, we'll do a quick demo of Symphony Next. All right. So I have my terminal open here, and I am at my Symphony mainline. Okay, so first I'm going to do is, like I mentioned, we use Gulp for our build process. So today, for Symphony, for developers on the phone, it's a bit of a hassle to get Symphony Next at the drop. I mean, you can pick it up from your Maven repository, But if you want to build your own, it takes some knowledge of, talking to the team and, talking to DevOps, it takes a while, right? Now, I'm going to show you how easy it is to build Symphony, okay? So it takes about 5 seconds. And then you get a zip file and you're good to go, okay? I'll show you what's in the zip file. So it's in my target, distribution, and zip, okay? So open this up, you're gonna see, you're gonna see some CSS fonts, images, and so on, but what we're interested in is these JavaScript files, okay? Now remember I mentioned all you need is 4 JavaScript files. Those are the API, core, web shell, and widgets, okay? If you need any other features of Symphony, like the IMF or inbox or library and so on, and then of course you're going to include a few more of these files. But the bare minimum that you need to get an Archipelago application going is these 4 files, okay? And then you're done, all right? So what kind of application you can build? Let me start a demo here. So again, with Gulp, I'm able to debug my applications. I can run them in a Node.js browser backend. So it'll help me easily to debug my JavaScript pieces. Okay. So this is an example application. We call it a Sonata. It's like a kind of a smaller Symphony. So what the Symphony team does is any new feature we add to Symphony, any new widgets, any new API changes, we implement that in Sonata. So this is our reference implementation of your Symphony spec, so to speak, right? So here you can see there's a few workspaces. So workspaces, as you're aware, are concepts that are existing in today's Symphony, and we're continue going to have it. So these are fixed workspaces, which means things that the user cannot close. Okay. So on the top, we have a nice collapse expand, and so this is so these are Archipelago patterns. You have the product switcher, I can switch between products. The cloud has an organization, I can change organizations. There's a search interface. I can put some custom icons here. There's also a notification interface. It shows you all the notifications I have, and so on. Right? Settings, user, and help. Let me show you quickly the search interface. I'm going to open customer object, and now it opens this as an asset. Okay, so now you can see this is a different kind of workspace. This is what we call an asset workspace, where you can close it. Okay, so let me open a report. So you can see now the asset workspace can also be grouped. Okay, let me open another report. So these are nicely grouped, and you have all these nice things you can move around, close, expand, close certain things, close other things. So these are all Archipelago patterns that Symphony implements, and you get this out of the box. Okay, so as a developer, for you don't have to worry about the implementation of this navigation bar or the header. All you have to provide is what we call data providers, for the search and for all these actions, and you just tell us, what the icons to use and what names. Okay, so everything else is done by Symphony. So what this means is that if you're an application developer, the header and the nav bar is done by Symphony, and the header panel here that shows the name and icon is also done by Symphony. From this, if you can see my mouse pointer, from this pixel down here to the right is your canvas. So what goes inside of this is up to you. Okay, so you're in control of what's going on here. Of course, if you use Symphony widgets, if you use the Symphony's panel container, you get all the layout functionality. And if you use the Symphony grid, you get all the sorting, the headers and so on, right? But this is where a Symphony application developer begins. Okay. All right. So in the interest of time, I'm going to skip showing the code, but I will go into more details of how to migrate. Okay, but if you have time later on, I can come back and look at the code as well. All right, so going back to our deck. So a lot of you might be wondering, hey, I've invested 2 years of my developer's life in Symphony. What do I need to do? So before that, many of you guys know South Park. It's one of my favorite series. So there's an episode where there are these gnomes that are collecting underpants. Okay, they go around the block and collect underpants, but they know they have to make profit at some point, but they're not sure why. I mean, they're not sure how. Okay, and you might have seen the meme, internet, this, how to make profit out of anything, right? So, of course, here, what you guys will do first is you're going to upgrade to Symphony Next. You're just going to get the drop when Symphony Next, which is Symphony 3.0. And how do you profit? Okay, you do nothing. Okay, so we have taken care of every single thing that you would need for your current Symphony applications to migrate to Symphony Next. Okay, now what does this mean? So today your Symphony application looks something like this, where you have your core plugins, which are Symphony plugins. You might or might not use some of these features, and you have all your application plugins, which is your app-specific JavaScript and Java files that are sitting here. Okay. Now when you go to Symphony Next, all that happens is all the core plugins, they get compacted. Some of them get renamed, some of them are gone, some of them are compressed into other plugins. So from today's 50 or so plugins, you might end up with 3 or 4. Okay, but we're going to take care of fixing all the plugin XML and all the references you may have in your code and plugin XMLs. And once you've done that, your Symphony, today's Symphony application should now be Symphony Next. Now, what the profit is in this case is you get Archipelago. Your application is going to look brand new. You're going to get all the widgets that get changed, and you're going to get the responsive layout. Okay. So again, this is an applause. I understand you guys are applauding right now, but so we're taking care of that part for you. Okay. Now, you might be asking, hey, by the way, this is awesome app too. So Arun, so now your Symphony Next application, you're still in OSGI, but that's okay. Okay, so you are still getting Archipelago and all the nice enhancements being made for the layout and widgets. Okay. Now you might be wondering, hey, can I do something? Can I do something to get a bigger profit? Okay. Yes, you can. What we encourage you to do is to decouple. Okay, we want you to decouple your JavaScript and UI pieces out of OSGI. Okay, if you do that, you're going to get a much bigger profit. Okay, what the profit means? So again, this is your Symphony application today. Now, as you may be aware, all these plugins are nothing but a package of JavaScript and Java pieces. Okay, so this is what we recommend you to do after you upgrade. Okay, so first thing is, so on the right here, this is your today's Symphony application. We want you after you upgrade, you get all the Symphony core plugins like we saw before. Now, what we're asking is that go ahead and create a separate web app for the UI. Okay. Now, this doesn't have to be, again, this doesn't have to be Java. It could, all it has to have is the Symphony Next JavaScript pieces. Okay. And then you look at these, your application plugins. We want you to move the JavaScript into this UI web app. Okay. Now you might be asking, hey, should I look at every single file and do manually? You can, but we've solved that for you. We have a Gulp task that will look at every plugin that you may have and separate the JS pieces out and fix the plugin XML. Okay. So now you have all your application JavaScript decoupled and moved outside to a separate web app. Okay. Then you no longer need these Symphony core plugins in your OSGI anymore. Okay. You might just need to have things that are really required for these features to continue to work. Again, you might not be using any of these features. In that case, really, you just have some Java in your OSGI piece. And again, if you do not need any of Symphony's Java implementations, Java plugins, you may not even necessarily be in OSGI anymore. Okay, you can completely, take a Java and move it into this application. Okay, this representation is only because you still have some dependency on IMF or MRS or Symphony authentication or storage and so on. Then you need to have these two web app approaches. Okay. Now you might be asking, hey, well, how am I going to maintain? How's authentication going to work if I log in here? How is it going to work here? Well, you know what? We have fixed that for you too. So we have provided a sample, a servlet for you that you can use in this web app that will now talk to Symphony's authentication web app. Okay. So if you have time later on, or maybe if you guys are interested, we can have a follow-up in the next bi-weekly where I can give you demos of how these will work. Okay. Any questions in the migration? All right, excellent. So again, so this is UI Symphony. Okay, it only has the UI features of Symphony, and this is what we call the headless Symphony. So it's still Symphony. It still has a lot of Symphony backend plugins, but there's no UI pieces here. All the UI pieces have been decoupled and moved to this web app. Right now, one of the advantages of doing the decouple is now it's a lot easier for you to deploy to the cloud. Now, what this means is that your app JavaScript that you had, that you decoupled out, can now easily be given to the cloud team for their cloud landing application, and that can now be shipped as part of the cloud JavaScript to the browser. Okay, and then what you can do is your backend of your current application that still needs to be on OSGI, it can now be a microservice. Okay, so this microservice will now be responsible for giving the data to this application JavaScript here. Okay, so this is a huge advantage of decoupling. Is now you have an opportunity to deploy your app to the cloud. All right. Okay, so before I proceed, we are towards the end of my presentation. I want you guys to, if you guys don't already know, we have an internal portal for all things Symphony. Okay, so this is called Dolphin. So if I go here, it should, come on, might take a couple of times. There we go. So this is our kind of a learning portal. Okay, so we just have we're just getting started on documentation, but you have some high-level view of what Symphony Next is. You have a documentation page. How it shows you how to get get your Symphony Next application set up, how to get it, and there's some code examples here. How to do it. Another thing to note here is that remember earlier I showed you how to build Symphony with the gulp zip. Well, if you don't want to do that, you could just come to Dolphin and click on this download link here. Okay, so this should give you. It's not going to be the nightly build, but it's our every 2 weeks when our Symphony iteration ends, this is a certified version of Symphony. Okay, so this might not be the latest, but you understand, it just helps you to get started. Okay.
All right. I have a question for you.
Sure.
So what shows, from deployment is nice, but I did see that you use Bower. Are you planning to give Symphony as a Bower component as well, or Symphony parts of Bower components?
Yeah.
So in every project, we just specify as a dependency.
Yeah, we looked at setting up an enterprise Git. We haven't made too much of a progress there, but we welcome any of you guys to volunteer for that effort as well. So if we can, as architect. sorry.
We can use
so
that
we
with
can as the
Target.
architecture team. I'm sorry.
We can use that. I mean, if you don't specify the version, but maybe we can use P-Force directly. If you specify maybe some local repository, we can point to a URL. That might be a little bit programmatic with versioning, because I don't know how the tags work in P-Force. But we can at least partially achieve that. But we can take this offline
Yeah.
and talk.
Okay, we definitely do that. So what Cam is mentioning is that if you look at some of the code, so we have something called the Bower. Let me open. So this is my application that was showing the Sonar application. That's my code. So I have so what Ken is mentioning is, hey, since we are already using Bower to pull stuff, can we just add, for example, down here, something like this, Symphony, right? And then it says, hey, I want 3.0 and up, right? Something like that, right? So yes, and from the initial investigation, to do all this, we need to have a local kind of a Git repository, and we just didn't have the bandwidth to proceed there. But if there are ways to directly point to Perforce, we're all for it. Okay. All right. So that's okay. Any other questions? All right. So I'm going to go back to my presentation. All right. So I want to show one more thing. Some of you guys may be wondering if it is there. Yes. So there's one more thing, which is Symphony Next is now integrated with AngularJS. Okay. So what this means is that if you're an AngularJS application, I know some of the teams, some of the applications in Informatica are, and so far, it was, very crude integration, or, you simply, don't even want to do it, right? Now we have a clear separation of Symphony and the AngularJS integration, okay? So what this means is that, let me, sorry about that, I'm going to open so what this means is that we have, we have all the Symphony JavaScript here, okay? So we have now a new layer called Symphony, Angular Symphony, okay? So this is where the glue between Symphony and Angular is, okay? So if you're an Angular application, you will include your Angular Symphony JS, and that is responsible for converting your Angular router, your Angular views into Symphony workspaces. Okay, we are working with the B2B team in Israel as our first consumer of the Angular integration of Symphony. We're very excited about this because this has been one of the recurring themes of why there's some internal restriction for using Symphony. So our hope is that with this Angular integration, a lot more teams are now on board of Symphony, and we'll help them with their Angular application, right? Okay, so that is the end of my presentation. So if you guys have any questions.
Hi Sri, it's Ronan in Dublin. I was just wondering, when you're showing Dolphin running, you also showed running it as a gulp task where you showed Sonata. Is that the full thing? Does the drop-down show, it's just a bit slow for us using Dolphin a lot of the time. If we could run locally from a gulp task and check all the documentation, it would be easier. Is that available?
Oh, Ronan, I think I missed a part of the question. Are you asking about the Dolphin documentation?
Yeah, so in this screen here somewhere you had a gulp task that started Sonata
Right.
earlier on in the presentation. Yeah, so gulp serve app Sonata. Is that the full deployment on Dolphin? I saw that you had the drop down in there as well. No, it's not. Okay.
It's not. So if you want the Dolphin Symphony, so that's Symphony uppercase N.
Okay.
So when you do this, it's going to pull up whatever you see on Dolphin. So that's your, if you want the latest on Dolphin and and not wait for Dolphin to get updated, this is what you do. Okay. So as you can see, on my local file, I'm making some changes to Dolphin. That's why you see, a slightly different organization. But that is how, if you don't want to connect to Dolphin, you can run, your local Dolphin like this.
Okay. That's good to know. I was looking for some new documentation earlier on that it wasn't there yet. So I was just loading static web pages. This would be an easier way of doing it.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was, sorry, could you just show the command again on the command line? The gulp task.
Sure. It's
gulp task. Gulp serve minus app Symphony. And thank you.
Welcome.
If no one else has any other questions, I was just wondering about how far along in terms of the automation for migration of plugin XML towards Symphony.next. Realistically, how far we're going to get and how far we are at this stage in bringing something that exists along.
So for Symphony Next, I'm sorry, is there another question? Okay, so for Symphony Next, our goal is first we're going to target the new applications like the cloud, and I think Ronan, you're also working on something new.
Yeah.
And the B2B team. So we're going to deliver Symphony Next, the JavaScript pieces in I believe it's in the May timeframe. Now after that, in June, July is when we're going to work on or deliver the migration functionality. So that's when existing Symphony applications should expect to be to get the drop for Symphony Next for their for their migration. So we're talking June and July.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Barry, I have a question. Actually, two questions. First of all, we do have quite a few directives that we have. How can we contribute that back to Symphony, and will Symphony have an ecosystem for directives?
Excellent. So if you look at our code base, let me actually bring Perforce so it's easier. So in source, we have a new folder called Angular Symphony, and in here there's widgets. You can put your widgets directives here. If you have any other directives, we have some directives for the header, actually, since we have some time, I'm going to show you the Angular demo. So this is the Sonata that we just saw, but just a subset of it that's running in Angular. Okay, so this is the same demo, but all you see here is these are all using directives. If you're familiar with Angular lingo, directives are just markup language that will internally implement widgets or even even something functional. Okay, so here I have my customer, and I can open this I can open a report, right? So what we have done is all the code that if you're a non-Angular application, you'll be using direct JavaScript APIs from Symphony to create workspaces and open a workspace and so on. But if you're an Angular application, you'll be using Symphony directives, which you say, hey, I would like a workspace that's called projects, and now that's a directive. And I would like a workspace that data sets and reports and so on. So these are all directives, right? So if you look at the code for Angular Sonata, so if you look at the my index.html, so now, so this is what a typical Angular application will do. Instead of writing JavaScript code to build your components, you would do it via your markup. And this is what we mean by directive. So info-shell is a Symphony directive that will implement, the archipelago, shell that you see here, right? And then you say, hey, there's a directive for search, notification, and so on. Okay. Now, if you want to do something with the workspace, you will again use markup for that. So we have info workspace directive, and you can specify, the workspace, properties, via these attributes here. Okay. So that's what is going on in here. Now, within each workspace, what the content of it is completely up to you. So in this case, you can see we have some example of how to create, content inside for data sets and for reports. Okay. So Kim, going back to your question, yes. So you will contribute your directives. I'm hoping they're all widgets. They will go in here.
Okay. And like you said, in the future, when we migrate to proper source systems like GitHub or Git, then we can directly contribute there. Okay. My other question is, so how are we going to handle the routing in Angular? So now, if you guys have control of the top, the navigation pane, and the left menu pane at the right, or navigation bar at the right, how are we going to control the routes? Can you show that?
Yeah. So right now, so this is using Angular UI router. So with Symphony Next, you'll be able to turn off Symphony's router. Okay, and that's what we did for this Angular example, where if you look at some code here in my application, when I just begin, I say Symphony ready, and then I say routing is turned off. Okay, so what this means is that you're now going to use your Angular router, and that's what so Symphony is now out of the picture. Okay. So there's only one thing you have to do in your Angular application to work with Symphony, which is when you're defining a workspace, as part of the workspace definition, we now ask to provide URL. Okay, so this URL should match your router URL. So then Symphony knows, okay, hey, if the router says, if the Angular router says project, then I know that I have to open, this workspace. Okay. Got it. So that's the only glue that the Angular application has to provide Symphony.
Okay, and personally, I think this is great. This is the most important feature that you guys provide. This proves the perfect decoupling. Thank you. I'm really happy to see this.
Excellent. All right. Any more questions?
So especially for the UI guys, right? So if there are any stuff that we want Sri and team to investigate and report back on, this is a good time to identify questions that a team should look into, and maybe we haven't answered enough, and that might need some discussions or investigations for us to follow up on. So are there any of those kind?
So Arun, I think from our perspective, like we mentioned, bringing in Symphony with Bower, with packages. So maybe we can take that offline and talk with Siri. But it looks like we might need to start to think about maybe like internal Git repository or GitHub repository. That's one thing. The other thing that we talked about is contributing. Maybe we can talk with Siri about some of the guidelines and rules, like what are the testings we have to provide, or what are the coding standards we can do. That I think that will be important. The third thing I think we should talk about going future is the UI application architecture, like how we're going to structure the components, the elements. So maybe we can take that offline and talk with Siri and get some help. And probably that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other guys, SDQ or B2B, any other items we should add to that list?
Just in terms of making Angular aside, our current app that we're trying to make with Symphony.next is not Angular-based, so switching from that type of question, is there going to be default Gulp tasks provided with Symphony to assemble and minify code, etc., and can you apply to your own code base, not just the actual Symphony code base itself? Because at the moment there it's four distinct classes, etc., I understand, but if we want to create just as small as possible, we need features like that available.
Are you okay? Is your question to how to minify the application code, or more of how to only use certain widgets that you need from Symphony?
No, it's more about just minification and whether you guys are providing something out of the box or whether we should just go ahead and do our own pieces.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, we will definitely provide minification. So today we don't. I mean, at least as of now with Symphony Next. But if you know, the classic Symphony does have some minification. But yes, we will have when you do a gulp, zip, you should get minified JS. And you should be able to use the same task for your application as well.
Okay. And will that be made available with the GA release of Symphony Next?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Also, can I comment on that too? I don't know if you agree or Ronan if you agree. I mean, from out of the box, Gulp provides minifications in the structure the way we want, not just for JavaScript, but also for CSS. It provides image optimization, right?
Mm-hmm.
It provides some other very cool stuff too. For example, it provides you to create a distribution directory. So we can probably, since we're using Gulp, we can take advantage of all the functionality that Gulp provides.
Yeah. Right? I was more wondering whether we're going to have to provide links to those features in our own Gulp file or whether there'll be a central piece made available. That's all.
No, yeah, Ronan, so you're going to have something from the Symphony team for minification.
But I agree with Ken. We shouldn't be doing internal pieces. We should be using industrial standard ways of doing it. It was just whether it will be provided. That's, I think, the only distinguishing feature between myself and Ken in the terms of what we're discussing.
Okay.
So Sri, can you maybe summarize all the questions and outstanding items and send out an email to the group, and then we'll figure out an update time at a later point.
Sure, sounds good. Okay.
So thank you so much for showing this, Sri.
You're welcome.
So just one other thing, I saw the original invite said it was a bi-weekly meeting, but it was a singular meeting request that went out that I got. I don't know whether.
Yeah, so it's a bi-weekly meeting that's set up for the TAC, but depending on the topic that's being done, there are some additional invites. So for this meeting, because it was UI focused, we had additional people attending from the UI community. So depending on the topic, that will vary, and there's a core set of people which meet every meeting.
Okay.
All right. So since we have 7 more minutes, I would like to show the decoupled example. So I mentioned that for migration, you have two options. One is do nothing and continue to be in OSGI. But the recommended approach is to decouple your JS from your OSGI and leave anything, any Java and other Symphony features that you need in OSGI as a separate web app. Okay. So what we've done here is a simple inbox. Now this is, if you're familiar with today's inbox, this is actual inbox code that's been moved out of OSGI, and it's all in, in this separate web app that we call UI. Now, if you look at my network down here, just do a quick refresh. So some of, it's all using UI. At some point, it's going to start going to a separate web app called OSGI for the inbox data. Okay. So if you look at my Tomcat, web apps, I have a UI WAR file, and I also have OSGI WAR file. Okay. So when I log in, when you guys saw me log in initially, that authentication, we use JSON Web Token, and you pass that to the non-OSGI, to the OSGI application, and that's how we get authenticated on both ends. Okay, and so we have the example servlet and JavaScript for you to get started there as well. So the this is just a quick demo. What this means is that you could continue to leave anything that has to be on OSGI in OSGI, just a separate web application, and move all your UI elements into a separate web app. Now, once you do that, what happens is that your front-end developer no longer needs to use Eclipse. He can be in a different IDE. You can use Gulp to run a test. You can of course continue to use. So this is this is an example of where this application has some data coming from an OSGI backend, and it could also have something from a non-OSGI, which is just from JavaScript itself, right? So yeah, so when you get Symphony next and you're ready to migrate, consider decoupling your JavaScript, from your plugins. All right. Okay. I'm actually glad that I demoed everything that I wanted to.
All right, and all in good time. Thanks, Sri.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. And of course, any questions, feel free to ping me directly. Don't have to wait for the next meeting.
Thanks, Sri.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks, Sri.
Thanks,
bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sri.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Sri.
Bye.
Thank you.